The war lasted 6 hours. For 50,000 years, the Galactic Council had never lost a war. Not once. Entire civilizations had risen, challenged them, and vanished into dust long before anyone could remember their names. Empires had burned. Species had been erased. Stars themselves had dimmed under the weight of Council authority. And then, in 6 hours, it ended. Not with a final battle. Not with a desperate last stand. But with a realization. Long before the first shot was fired, humanity had already won. The chamber was built to make that impossible. It stretched upward into darkness so vast that even the light seemed reluctant to climb it. Massive pillars of unknown material curved like the ribs of some ancient cosmic beast, enclosing a space that felt less like a room and more like a verdict. Soft blue lights drifted high above, suspended in the air like captive stars, casting a cold, distant glow over everything below. At the center of it all stood one human. Ambassador Elena Virel did not move. She stood alone on the circular platform, a single figure surrounded by power so ancient it had forgotten what fear felt like. Around her, rising in endless tiers, the representatives of the Galactic Council watched in silence. Thousands of eyes. Thousands of judgments. Some of them shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting light in colors that did not exist in any human spectrum. Others pulsed behind translucent membranes, their forms barely contained within hovering fields of energy. A few, only a few, looked almost human. Those were the worst. Because their faces were familiar, but their eyes were not. Their eyes held something geological. Something that had existed long before humanity had learned to shape fire. Something that did not see Elena as a person, only as a variable. They had been speaking about her species for over 2 hours. Not to her. Around her. Through her. Continued expansion into restricted sectors. Failure to adhere to developmental compliance. Statistically predictable aggression patterns. The words blurred together, translated perfectly into her language, and yet stripped of meaning by tone alone. They were not discussing a civilization. They were diagnosing a problem. Elena did not react. She did not shift her weight. Did not glance up. Did not betray the slightest discomfort. Because every movement, every breath, every flicker of human weakness was being measured. They believed they understood humanity. That was their first mistake. To them, humans were young, soft, emotional. A species that smiled too quickly, negotiated too easily, and clung to fragile concepts like peace and cooperation because they had not yet learned the mathematics of survival. They had watched humanity's history. The wars. The divisions. The endless cycle of conflict. And they had drawn a simple conclusion. Humans fought each other because they were too primitive to do anything else. They had not understood the truth. Elena had spent 15 years inside this system. 15 years listening. Observing. Learning. Not the version of the Council presented to the galaxy, but the one hidden beneath it. The one buried in classified transmissions, suppressed reports, and patterns that only became visible when you stopped believing what you were told. 15 years was a long time. Long enough to map behavior. Long enough to predict decisions. Long enough to prepare. Above her, one of the elder delegates shifted. Its body refracted light into sharp, crystalline fragments that scattered across the chamber floor like broken reflections of something colder than logic. When it moved, the sound was not organic. It was harmonic. Precise. Controlled. Ancient. The discussions began to slow. Voices faded. One by one, the representatives fell silent. Not because they had reached agreement, but because the outcome had never truly been in question. And for the first time since she had entered the chamber, every eye turned to her. Elena finally looked up. Not quickly. Not nervously. But with the calm, measured motion of someone who had already seen this moment. Long before it happened. Far above, something shifted. A figure rose from the highest tier. Larger than the others. Sharper. More defined. The center of gravity in a room built entirely around power. When it spoke, the chamber itself seemed to listen. And somewhere, buried beneath layers of silence and certainty, The future began to break. The being at the highest tier unfolded slowly, not rising, but assembling itself upward, as though gravity had finally remembered its authority. Its body was composed of interlocking crystalline planes, each surface reflecting a different spectrum of light, none of them warm. Edges sharp enough to suggest intention. Geometry so precise it felt designed rather than grown. When it moved, the chamber filled with a faint harmonic resonance. Not sound. Not exactly. Something closer to vibration. Tuned to authority. Ambassador Elena Virel. Her name did not echo. The chamber carried it perfectly, delivering it to every ear, every sensory organ, every translated interface without distortion. A system built to ensure that nothing spoken here could be misunderstood. Elena inclined her head slightly. Not submissive. Not defiant. Acknowledging. Presence. The Galactic Council, the being continued, has concluded its deliberation regarding your species. A pause. Measured. Deliberate. The kind of pause that existed not for thought, but for impact. Above and around her, subtle movements rippled through the tiers. Delegates leaned forward. Shifted. Observed. Not with curiosity. With expectation. They had seen this before. Humanity, the being said, was granted accelerated access to interstellar space under provisional observation. The words were clean. Clinical. Carefully constructed to sound generous. We provided guidance. A faint flicker of light across its surface. We provided protection. Another shift. We provided opportunity. And then, the tone changed. Almost imperceptibly. But enough. And in return, humanity has demonstrated consistent deviation from acceptable developmental parameters. A low murmur spread across the chamber. Not disagreement. Confirmation. An authorized expansion into restricted territories. Independent military development beyond agreed limitations. Refusal to submit strategic infrastructure for council oversight. Each charge appeared in the air as it was spoken, holographic text forming in perfect clarity, translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. Cold. Precise. Final. Elena did not look at the projections. She didn't need to. She had read them before they were written. You have mistaken access for equality, the being said. And now, there it was. The truth beneath the diplomacy. You were never granted sovereignty. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. The words settled into the chamber like dust that would never be cleaned. You were managed. Somewhere in the upper tiers, a delegate emitted a soft, rhythmic clicking, amusement, translated automatically. Another pulsed faintly with color, agreement. A third simply watched. Unblinking. Elena remained still. Inside, her mind did not race. It aligned. Every word. Every tone shift. Every pause. Exactly where it was supposed to be. They were following the pattern. We have observed your species closely, the being continued. Your history is instructive. A flicker. Images appeared. Wars. Explosions. Cities burning. Human soldiers moving through smoke and ruin. Conflict is your default state. More images. Missiles. Battlefields. Graves. Cooperation, it said, is a temporary adaptation, not a defining trait. The chamber dimmed slightly, as though even the light was focusing. You are a species that destroys itself. And then, the final turn. It is therefore the unanimous conclusion of this council, that humanity cannot be permitted to continue its current trajectory. Not debate. Not concern. Not even accusation. A decision. The holographic display shifted. The previous charges dissolved. Replaced by something else. Structured. Ordered. Final. Terms. Around her, the delegates leaned forward just slightly more. Not because they were uncertain, but because this was the part they always enjoyed. The moment a species realized what it truly was. In the eyes of something older. Elena finally let her gaze rise. Not to the terms. Not yet. To them. Thousands of alien minds. Thousands of different forms. All united by one quiet, unshakable belief. That this would end the way it always did. Compliance. She studied them the same way they believed they had studied humanity. Carefully. Patiently. Without emotion. They thought this was control. They thought this was power. They thought this was the moment humanity understood its place. Elena exhaled slowly. Barely visible. They had no idea how wrong they were. The holographic field sharpened. What had been accusation became structure. What had been judgment became law. A document unfolded in the air. Not a simple projection, but something vast. Layered. Dense. Its surface segmented into thousands of clauses, each one branching into subclauses, conditions, enforcement protocols. It rotated slowly above the chamber floor, large enough that every delegate could read it simultaneously. And more importantly, so could she. This, the hierarch said, represents the Council's final terms for human integration into the established galactic order. Integration. Not alliance. Not partnership. Integration. The first clause illuminated. Clause 1. Military reassignment. All human military vessels exceeding Class 3 designation will be surrendered to Council Command within 30 standard cycles. A pause. Assets will be redistributed to Council peacekeeping divisions. Peacekeeping. Elena's eyes didn't move. But behind them, something cold shifted. 200 warships. Every major defense platform humanity had built over 15 years. Handed over. Not destroyed. Not negotiated. Taken. The second clause ignited. Clause 2. Colonial oversight. All human colonies will accept permanent council governance supervision. Expansion beyond currently registered systems is prohibited. Population distribution and resource allocation will be regulated to ensure compliance with stability protocols. A flicker of movement across the chamber. Approval. Agreement. Routine. To them, this was reasonable. To Elena, it was suffocation. Humanity would not grow. Would not expand. Would not decide its own future. It would exist. Only within boundaries defined by something else. The third clause appeared. Clause 3. Reparations. Humanity will provide compensation totaling 5 trillion credits for unauthorized territorial expansion, infrastructure disruption, and destabilization of Council-aligned systems. A ripple passed through the tiers. Not surprise. Satisfaction. The number wasn't arbitrary. It was impossible. Even if humanity surrendered everything, it would not be enough. And that was the point. Debt was control. The fourth clause formed more slowly. As if it mattered more. Clause 4. Compliance enforcement. A council oversight fleet will be stationed within human territory indefinitely. Non-compliance will result in corrective action. Corrective. Not war. Not invasion. Correction. As if humanity were a malfunction. The document stabilized. All clauses visible. All translations complete. Every word precise. Every implication intentional. Above her, the hierarch lowered one crystalline limb. You will have 30 cycles to comply. Another pause. Longer this time. And now, for the first time, there was something new in its voice. Amusement. Subtle. Refined. But unmistakable. 17 council fleets are already positioned at the perimeter of your controlled space. The chamber shifted. Not physically, but perceptually. Power became visible. They will remain in place, the hierarch continued, to facilitate a smooth transition. Facilitate. Elena almost smiled. Around her, the delegates leaned in slightly. Some with open curiosity now. Others with something closer to boredom. A few, very few, watched more carefully, as if waiting for something they could not yet define. Because this was the moment. Every species reached it eventually. The realization. The breaking point. The instant where defiance collapsed under the weight of inevitability. The script was always the same. Shock. Anger. Desperation. Then, compliance. The hierarch tilted its form slightly, observing her. Do you understand the terms presented to you, Ambassador? The question wasn't a question. It was confirmation. Because from their perspective, there was only one possible outcome. Elena finally looked at the document. Truly looked at it. Not as a diplomat. Not as a representative. But as someone reading a declaration of ownership. Military. Colonies. Economy. Autonomy. Future. Every piece of humanity. Reduced to terms. She let the silence stretch. Just long enough. Across the chamber, attention tightened. A few delegates shifted. A few leaned closer. Waiting. Because this was the part they understood. The moment where resistance collapsed. Elena inhaled slowly. And for the first time, something changed. Not in her posture. Not in her expression. But in the space around her. A stillness. Sharper. Heavier. The kind of stillness that didn't belong in a room like this. Because it wasn't uncertainty. It was decision. She raised her eyes from the terms. Back to the hierarch. And for a fraction of a second. Something passed between them. Something the hierarch did not recognize. And that was its second mistake. Silence held. Not the controlled silence of the council. Not the orchestrated stillness of power waiting to be acknowledged. Something else. Elena let it stretch. 1 second. 2. 3. Long enough for discomfort to begin. High above, a delegate shifted, subtle, but noticeable. Another adjusted its posture, sensory tendrils retracting slightly as if reacting to a change it couldn't define. They felt it. But they didn't understand it. Good. Elena lowered her gaze, not in submission, but in thought. For 15 years, she had stood in rooms like this. Smaller rooms. Private rooms. Rooms where decisions were made before they were ever announced. She had listened. Watched. Recorded everything. Not just what they said. But how they said it. When they hesitated. When they didn't. Patterns. That was the first thing humanity had learned about the council. They were predictable. Not individually. Individually, they were too different. Too alien. Too varied. But collectively, they followed structure. Hierarchy. Procedure. And procedure. Could be mapped. Mapped. Modeled. Simulated. Elena's eyes flickered slightly. Not enough for them to notice. But enough. They thought this moment was spontaneous. That this confrontation, this ultimatum, was the natural outcome of human behavior. It wasn't. It had been building for 12 years. 12 years of carefully observed responses. 12 years of controlled expansion. 12 years of making sure humanity looked exactly like what they expected it to be. Impatient. Reactive. Emotional. Predictable. A species that could be guided. Contained. Managed. Elena almost admired it. The scale of their system. The precision of their control. If she hadn't spent the last decade dismantling it piece by piece. You have been very thorough, she said quietly. The words cut through the chamber. Not loud. Not forceful. But clear. The hierarch's attention sharpened. This document reflects considerable analysis, Elena continued. Behavioral projections. Strategic modeling. Resource forecasting. She tilted her head slightly. It's impressive. A ripple of subtle reaction moved through the tears. Not approval. Not exactly. Recognition. They understood that tone. Respect. And respect. From a subordinate species. Was expected. But something about it felt wrong. You studied us, Elena said. She let that sit. You studied our history. A faint shift in the holographic field, images flickering in response to her words. Wars. Battles. Human conflict. You studied our psychology. More data. Behavioral charts. Emotional response curves. You studied our patterns. The chamber dimmed slightly as systems adjusted. Information aligning. Confirming. The hierarch remained still. Because this was still within expectation. Acknowledgement. Understanding. Acceptance. But Elena's next words didn't fit. And you were very thorough, she said again. A fraction softer. A fraction sharper. But you made a mistake. It was small. Almost invisible. But it was there. A pause. Not from her. From them. Across the chamber, several delegates stilled completely. Others leaned forward, just slightly. Because now, this was no longer part of the script. The hierarch's voice returned. Still controlled. Still precise. Clarify. One word. But beneath it, something had shifted. Elena looked up fully now, meeting the center tier directly. Not defiant. Not aggressive. Certain. You assumed, she said, that what you were observing was what we were. Silence. You assumed our history defined us. The images above flickered again. Wars. Destruction. Chaos. You assumed our behavior was uncontrolled. More data. More projections. You assumed, she continued, that our attempts at diplomacy were evidence of limitation. A slight tilt of her head. That our cooperation meant dependency. Another pause. That our patience. Now, she let the word hang. Meant weakness. The chamber did not move. Did not react. But something, deep beneath the surface, tightened. Because this tone, they had heard it before. Not often. But enough. It was the tone of a species that had already made a decision. And was no longer asking permission. Elena took a slow breath. And for the first time, something slipped through. Not emotion. Not fear. But truth. We weren't being patient, she said. A pause. And then, the line that didn't belong in their model. We were buying time. Nothing moved. Nothing reacted. But the chamber felt different. Because in that moment, for the first time, the Galactic Council realized they might not understand what they were dealing with. Silence. Not the Council's silence. Not controlled. Not ceremonial. Uncertain. It spread slowly, like a fracture you couldn't see yet, but could feel. High above, several delegates had gone completely still. Others shifted in ways too subtle to name. A ripple without motion. The hierarch remained upright, perfectly composed. But something in the light refracting across its crystalline surface had changed. Not visibly. Structurally. You claim, it said carefully, that your species has been preparing. The word sounded wrong in its voice. Like it didn't belong to the same reality. Elena didn't answer immediately. She didn't rush to fill the silence. Didn't defend. Didn't explain. Because this was the moment. Not the beginning. The confirmation. She stepped forward. Just once. The sound of her boot against the crystal floor echoed outward. Clean, precise, impossibly loud in the stillness. Thousands of eyes tracked the movement instantly. Not because it was aggressive. Because it wasn't. There was no tension in it. No hesitation. Just intent. Elena stopped at the exact center of the platform. Deliberate. Measured. She looked up. Not at the document. Not at the fleets waiting beyond the stars. At them. All of them. For 15 years, she had stood beneath their authority. Spoken their language. Followed their rules. Played her role. Today. That ended. Hierarch, she said. Her voice carried without effort. No amplification. No strain. Just clarity. On behalf of the United Earth Directorate. A pause. And in that pause, something broke. Not visibly. Not audibly. But irreversibly. I have reviewed your terms. The chamber held its breath. They are comprehensive. A flicker of movement in the upper tiers. Recognition. Expectation. Here it comes. The part they knew. The part that always came. And unacceptable. It landed softly. Too softly. For a moment, no one reacted. Because the word didn't fit. It didn't connect to the outcome they understood. The hierarch did not move. Clarify, it said. Not sharper. Not louder. But tighter. Elena didn't blink. We reject your terms. Now. The chamber reacted. Not with chaos. Not yet. With confusion. A disruption in pattern. A break in expectation. Several delegates turned toward one another. Others leaned forward sharply. A few emitted low-frequency pulses. Signals translating to disbelief. This wasn't how it worked. This wasn't how it ever worked. You misunderstand, the hierarch said. And now, for the first time, there was something beneath the control. Strain. You are not in a position to. We understand perfectly, Elena interrupted. And that was the second break. Interrupting a hierarch. In the council chamber. Unthinkable. The chamber froze again. Not because of what she said. But because she said it. Elena took another step forward. Smaller this time. Closer to the center of everything. We understand your fleets are already in position. A flicker across multiple displays. Confirmations. We understand the scale difference. Numbers appeared briefly. Billions. Trillions. Fleets. Ships. We understand, she continued, that in a direct confrontation. She paused. Just long enough. We cannot win. Now. There it was. Stability. The chamber settled slightly. The pattern reasserting itself. Yes. This they understood. This was logic. This was reality. The hierarch's form brightened subtly. Then you will comply. Not a question. A return to order. Elena looked at it. Truly looked. And then. She shook her head. Once. No. The word hit harder than the rejection. Because it followed logic. And broke it anyway. The silence that followed. Was different. Not confusion. Realization. Because now. They understood something far more dangerous than defiance. Certainty. Elena's voice lowered slightly. Not weaker. Colder. We are not negotiating. A breath. And then. The line that would echo across the galaxy. We are informing you. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. Because in that moment, for the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Council felt it. Not fear. Not yet. But the shape of it. Grand Admiral Kareth stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display unfold in perfect symmetry. 17 fleets. 17 approach vectors. A flawless encirclement. From above, human space looked small. Contained. Predictable. Clusters of blue icons, civilian worlds, trade routes, scattered colonies, surrounded by a tightening ring of red. Council vessels. Thousands of them. It was elegant. Kareth appreciated elegance. War, when done correctly, was not chaos. It was mathematics. And this was a solved equation. Status, he said. His voice carried easily across the command deck of the Dominion Ascendant, the flagship of Battlefleet 1. A vessel older than most civilizations. A ship that had never known defeat. All fleets in position ahead of schedule, Admiral, his operations officer replied. Outer perimeter secured. No resistance encountered. Kareth nodded once. Human response. A brief pause. Not hesitation. Verification. They are withdrawing. The display shifted. Blue icons, human vessels, moving inward. Retreating from outer colonies. Burning hard toward inner systems. Evacuation patterns. Messy. Disorganized. Predictable. Kareth exhaled slowly. Of course they are. Around him, the bridge crew relaxed, just slightly. Not visibly. But enough. Because this was familiar. He had seen it before. Dozens of times. A young species confronted with overwhelming force. Realizing too late what it was facing. They always ran first. They are abandoning their outer territories, the intelligence officer added. Large-scale civilian transport movement detected. Minimal military escort. Minimal. Kareth repeated. Yes, Admiral. Fewer than 50 confirmed warships. Scattered. Defensive posture only. A faint ripple of amusement passed through the command deck. 50. Against 17 fleets. Kareth allowed himself a small, controlled smile. They understand the situation. Of course they did. Despite the ambassador's performance. Despite the defiance. Reality always reasserted itself. Numbers. Scale. Inevitability. Prepare transmission, he said. The communications officer turned instantly. Priority channel. All human systems. A pause. Begin recording. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the system engaged. Kareth stepped forward into the center of the projection field. He stood tall. Composed. Every line of his posture calculated. When addressing a species at the moment of surrender, he had once been taught, clarity matters more than cruelty. He had always agreed. This is Grand Admiral Kareth of the Galactic Council, he began. His voice transmitted instantly across human space. Every channel. Every frequency. You are witnessing the consequences of defiance. The tactical display behind him shifted, zooming out, showing the full encirclement. The scale. The inevitability. Your evacuation efforts are noted. A beat. They will not alter the outcome. Across the bridge, data continued to stream. No anomalies. No resistance. No deviation from expected behavior. Everything. Exactly as predicted. Stand down your remaining military assets, Kareth continued. Transmit compliance codes. Surrender your fleet and infrastructure as directed. Another pause. This is your final opportunity to preserve your species. He ended the transmission. Silence returned to the bridge. For a moment. No one spoke. Because it was done. Not officially. Not yet. But effectively. Kareth turned back to the tactical display. Blue continued to shrink. Red continued to close. A perfect convergence. Time to full incursion, he asked. 28 cycles, Admiral. Ahead of schedule. He allowed himself another small satisfaction. Excellent. Around him, officers resumed their duties. Routine adjustments. Minor recalibrations. Victory, at this stage, was administrative. And yet, there was something. Kareth's gaze lingered on the outer regions. The contested systems. Asteroid belts. Debris fields. Irrelevant. Still. Report, he said. The intelligence officer looked up. Admiral. Outer sector anomalies. There was a mention earlier. A flicker of hesitation. Yes, Admiral. Minor irregular energy readings detected in several asteroid belts. Natural. A pause. Unclear. Kareth considered that. Briefly. Then dismissed it. Sensor interference. Civilian infrastructure remnants. Nothing of consequence. Yes, Admiral. The officer returned to their station. And just like that. It was gone. Filed away. Ignored. Because it didn't fit the model. And the model had never been wrong. Kareth folded his arms again. 17 fleets. 4,000 ships. Against a species that was running. This wasn't a war. It was a conclusion. Far beyond the viewport, stars burned in cold silence. And hidden among them. In places the council had already dismissed. Something waited. Patient. Unseen. Exactly where it needed to be. Admiral. The voice cut across the bridge. Sharp. Different. Kareth turned. The intelligence officer wasn't composed anymore. Report. The officer hesitated. Not because he didn't have the data, but because he didn't understand it. The outer sector readings, he said. They're increasing. Kareth frowned slightly. Define increasing. They're synchronizing. That word lingered. It didn't belong. Energy signatures didn't synchronize. Not naturally. Kareth stepped closer to the display. Show me. The hologram shifted, zooming into the asteroid belt of the Tarsi's corridor. A dense field. Billions of rock fragments drifting in chaotic orbit around a dying star. At first, nothing. Just stone, ice, silence. Then, a flicker. One point of light. Then another. Then, thousands. The entire field lit up. Not randomly. Together. Perfectly aligned. Kareth's expression didn't change. But something behind it did. Identification. The sensor officer's hands moved rapidly across the console. Energy signatures, artificial. A beat. Repeat, artificial. The bridge went still. How long? Kareth asked. Another pause. Unknown. That was the wrong answer. Kareth's voice dropped. How long have they been there? The officer swallowed. Years. Silence. Then, everything happened at once. The asteroid field moved. Not drifting. Activating. Massive rocks split open along invisible seams, their surfaces peeling away in perfect geometric segments. Stone became structure. Structure became machinery. Machinery became weapons. Thousands of them. Hidden in plain sight. Waiting. Weapon locks engaged. Across the entire belt. Targets acquired simultaneously. Kareth's eyes widened. Just slightly. Defensive. Too late. The first volley fired. There was no warning. No charge. No visible energy build. Just impact. Rail slugs. Dense metal projectiles accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossing the void in less than a heartbeat. The first Council cruiser vanished. Not exploded. Not damaged. Erased. A perfect hole punched through its core. Matter displaced so violently it ceased to exist as structure. Then another. And another. 17 ships. Gone in a single instant. Return fire, someone shouted. But there was nothing to fire at. Because the asteroids weren't stationary. They shifted. Adjusted. Tracked. Every movement precise. Every angle calculated. Multiple incoming signatures, the tactical officer screamed. Missiles. Hundreds. No. Thousands. They didn't fly like missiles. They moved like thoughts. Adjusting course in real time. Dodging defensive fire before it was even fired. Predicting interception paths. And avoiding them. AI-guided systems, the officer shouted. They're using. I know what they're using, Kareth snapped. Illegal. Banned by Council law for over 30,000 years. Because no one could control them. Except, apparently, humanity. The missiles hit. Not the hulls. Inside. They bypassed shields entirely, appearing within the ships themselves before detonating. Internal explosions tore through engineering cores, command decks, life support systems. Ships didn't burn. They collapsed. Systems failing faster than crews could react. Admiral, we're losing formation. Kareth didn't answer. Because now, he saw it. The pattern. This wasn't random. This wasn't ambush. This was design. Every ship. Every vector. Every movement. They had been guided here. Pulled. Positioned. You moved exactly where we needed you to. The voice came through every channel. Calm. Clear. Human. Kareth froze. Identify source. No identifiable origin, Admiral, it's everywhere. Of course it was. Of course. Because this wasn't a battle. It was a system. And they were inside it. The cargo ships appeared next. Bursting out from deeper within the asteroid field. Their outer hulls peeled away. False structures collapsing into nothing. Revealing sleek, black warships beneath. Angular. Minimal. Built for one purpose. They moved like predators. Fast. Precise. Not reacting. Anticipating. Those aren't civilian vessels, the sensor officer whispered. No. They weren't. They never had been. The human ships opened fire. Beams cut across space. Not energy. Something else. Where they passed, matter disappeared. Not destroyed. Removed. Clean. Perfect absences carved into hulls. Ships split apart silently. Sections drifting into vacuum. No explosion. Just absence. Kareth felt it then. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. Understanding. This was planned, he said quietly. No one answered. Because they all knew. Not days ago. A pause. Not months. His voice dropped. Years. The bridge shook violently. Another impact. Another ship gone. The tactical display, once clean, organized, was collapsing. Red icons blinking out. One after another. Faster. 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 Admiral, the navigation officer shouted. All escape vectors are covered. Of course they were. Of course. Because they had mapped everything. Every response. Every retreat. Every possible move. There was nowhere left to go. Kareth stared at the display. At the pattern. At the perfection of it. And for the first time in his entire career, he understood. This was not a war. This was execution. By design. Admiral. The word broke apart in static. Not because of interference. Because the system carrying it no longer existed. The bridge lights flickered once. Then stabilized. Emergency protocols engaging automatically. Too late. Status. Kareth demanded. His voice held. Barely. Fleet cohesion collapsing, the tactical officer shouted. We've lost command synchronization across 3 sectors. No, 5. The display stuttered. Not from damage. From overload. Too many losses. Too fast. Red icons weren't retreating. They weren't going dark. They were disappearing. Reform defensive grid. Kareth snapped. Re-establish firing lines. There are no lines, the officer shouted back. And that was the problem. There was no battlefield. No front. No rear. No formation. Every direction was threat. Every vector was covered. The human ships moved through the chaos like it wasn't chaos at all. Because to them, it wasn't. It was structure. They cut through the Council fleet in precise arcs, never colliding, never hesitating. Each movement synchronized with the hidden platforms in the asteroid field. Each strike timed to intersect with another. Layered. No wasted motion. No redundant fire. Every shot meant something. They're coordinating across all systems simultaneously, the sensor officer said. Weapons platforms, missile arrays, warships, everything is linked. How? Someone demanded. No answer. Because the answer didn't exist. Not in any system the Council understood. Kareth's eyes scanned the display. Searching. There had to be a flaw. A gap. A mistake. There always was. That was how war worked. But here. Nothing. No inefficiency. No hesitation. No error. Just execution. FDL jump. Kareth ordered. All ships capable, prepare immediate withdrawal. The navigation officer froze. Admiral. What? They're tracking our jump calculations. Silence. That's not possible, someone said. It is, the officer replied. Every time we generate a trajectory, they adjust. They're predicting our exit points before we execute them. Kareth's jaw tightened. Of course they were. Because this wasn't reaction. This was anticipation. We mapped every decision you would make. The voice again. Calm. Unchanged. Every channel. Every system. Inside their ships. Inside their command. Inside everything. Kareth didn't ask where it was coming from anymore. He already knew. Everywhere. Then scramble it, he snapped. Randomize coordinates. We tried, the officer said. They're adapting faster than we can generate new variables. Another impact. The ship shuddered. Shield integrity at 40%. Multiple breaches on decks 9 through 12. Reactor output destabilizing. Kareth ignored it. Because something else had just appeared. At the edge of the display. Black shapes. At first. They didn't register. Because they didn't reflect light properly. They absorbed it. Distorted it. Made space itself look wrong. Identify those vessels, Kareth said. The sensor officer didn't answer immediately. Because he couldn't. Unknown. They just appeared, another officer said. No jump signature. No approach vector. They weren't there, and now they are. The black ships moved forward. Not fast. But with purpose. Like they didn't need speed. Like they already knew where everything was going to be. Those ships, the sensor officer whispered. Kareth turned. Report. The officer swallowed. They have no non-combat systems. A pause. No cargo bays. No scientific arrays. No diplomatic modules. He looked up. Nothing unnecessary. Silence. They were built for one thing. The black ships opened fire. And reality broke. Not metaphorically. Not visually. Physically. A beam crossed space. And where it touched, existence failed. A council dreadnought. 3 kilometers long. Simply. Stopped. A perfect circular absence carved through its center. No explosion. No debris. Just. Missing. The ship folded inward around the void. Structure collapsing. Gravity tearing it apart from within. Gone. Kareth stared. Not at the destruction. At the precision. At the impossibility. They're not overpowering our defenses, someone whispered. They're ignoring them. Missile swarms followed. Not chaotic. Organized. They spread across hulls like living things. Adapting. Learning. Changing behavior mid-attack. Drones. Thousands of them. Cutting. Disabling. Dismantling. Like a system taking something apart piece by piece. Admiral, the communications officer said quietly. Kareth didn't look away. Report. They're not targeting everything. That got his attention. What? They're selecting targets. The display zoomed. Human strikes. Weren't random. They weren't even focused on the most dangerous ships. They were targeting. Command vessels. Communication relays. Coordination nodes. Cutting the system apart. Not just destroying ships. Dismantling structure. They're thinking like engineers, the officer whispered. Kareth closed his eyes for half a second. And in that half second, everything aligned. The years. The patterns. The preparation. They weren't preparing for war, he said. He opened his eyes. They were preparing for us. Around him. The fleet died. Not loudly. Not gloriously. Efficiently. Retreat, Kareth said. No hesitation now. No pride. No illusion. Full withdrawal. Any ship capable of jump, go. And the others? Someone asked. Kareth didn't answer immediately. Another explosion. Another ship gone. Leave them. The words tasted like failure. But they were necessary. Because this couldn't be won. Not here. Not like this. Engines screamed as surviving vessels began charging for FTL. Around them, the battlefield burned. Asteroids still firing. Human ships still moving. Drones still cutting through anything that remained. A system still executing its design. The Dominion ascendant lurched. Then stabilized. Then, reality twisted. Stars stretched into lines. Light bent. Space folded. They jumped. And for a moment, there was silence. Kareth stood in it. Breathing. Alive. Behind him. The fleet status board updated. 237 ships. Now. More than half gone. In less than 6 hours. No war. No campaign. Just. Removal. Admiral. The sensor officer's voice trembled. Kareth turned slowly. What? The officer pointed at the display. At the FTL corridor behind them. They're still there. Kareth frowned. Impossible. The officer shook his head. No, Admiral. His voice dropped to a whisper. They're following us. Silence. Deep. Cold. Because now, there was nowhere left to run. They're following us. The words didn't feel real. FTL pursuit was impossible. Not difficult. Not advanced. Impossible. Once a ship entered faster-than-light transit, it left normal space behind. No tracking. No interception. No pursuit. That was the rule. It had always been the rule. Kareth stared at the display. And watched it break. Dark signatures moved within the corridor behind them. Not chasing. Not accelerating. Matching. Perfectly. They're not tracking us, the sensor officer whispered. A pause. They already knew where we were going. Kareth didn't respond. Because something else had just appeared. A transmission. Priority override. Not from the fleet. Not from command. From everywhere. All channels have been hijacked, the communications officer said. We're not receiving. The screen changed. Every screen. Every display. Every system. Across the fleet. Across the corridor. Across space itself. A single image replaced everything. A human. Ambassador Elena Virel. She sat calmly in a dimly lit room. No insignia. No visible authority. And yet, every system obeyed her. Good evening, she said. Her voice was exactly the same. Calm. Measured. Unchanged. Galactic Council. Kareth felt something cold settle in his chest. How? Someone began. No one finished. Because the answer was already there. We have been inside your systems for 12 years, Elena said. Silence. Not disbelief. Because disbelief required doubt. And there was none. Every screen. Every system. Every channel. Controlled. Perfectly. You focused on our military, she continued. Our expansion. Our behavior. A slight tilt of her head. You never considered our intelligence capabilities. The display shifted. Documents appeared. Internal council communications. Classified transmissions. Strategic planning files. Files that should not exist outside secured archives. Files that could not be accessed. Files that were now everywhere. This is a broadcast, Elena said. And then, the words that ended everything. To the entire galaxy. Kareth's breath stopped. Because this wasn't just happening to them. It was happening to everyone. Every species. Every world. Every system. Watching. The document scrolled. Cold. Precise. Unedited. 50,000 years of control. Manipulation. Intervention. Evidence of. Engineered conflicts. Suppressed technologies. Economic strangulation. Political assassinations. Not rumors. Records. With signatures. Authorization codes. Names. Explain it, Elena said softly. Not to them. To the galaxy. Explain why you funded proxy raids on developing colonies. New files appeared. Coordinates. Reports. Authorization chains. Kareth felt his throat tighten. He recognized them. Explain why you restricted technological advancement in species that showed independent growth. More files. Patterns. Timelines. Deliberate delays. Explain, she continued, why you classified entire civilizations as manageable assets. The words hung. Heavy. Unavoidable. Across the galaxy. Systems were watching. And for the first time. They were seeing. The council chamber. Consensus Prime. It appeared on the display. Live feed. Delegates frozen in place. No control. No authority. Just exposure. What do you want? Kareth whispered. Not to her. To reality itself. But she answered anyway. Nothing you weren't already offered. A pause. Choice. The screen shifted again. 6 new images. 6 worlds. Council core systems. Homeworlds of the most powerful species. Kareth recognized them instantly. And then, he saw it. Ships. Human ships. Hanging in orbit. Silent. Motionless. Already there. They've been in position for 12 years, Elena said. No pride. No emotion. Just fact. We built them slowly. Quietly. Disguised as civilian infrastructure. Commercial traffic. Survey operations. Kareth's hands trembled. Just slightly. Impossible. We understood your sensor networks, she continued. Long before you understood ours. The camera zoomed closer. The ships didn't move. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. Right now, Elena said, we can do to your homeworlds exactly what you intended to do to ours. Silence. Not fear. Beyond fear. Understanding. Because this wasn't a threat. It was proof. But we won't. The words landed heavier than anything before them. Because now, the power dynamic was complete. Total. Absolute. We are not here to destroy your species, she said. A pause. We are here to end your system. The galaxy listened. Every world. Every civilization. Every being that had ever lived under council rule. Effective immediately, Elena continued, the Galactic Council is dissolved. No explosion. No resistance. Because there was nothing left to resist with. All member species will be offered entry into a new federation. The word echoed. Not control. Not hierarchy. Federation. Equal representation. Independent sovereignty. Shared governance. Kareth closed his eyes. Because he understood. Not just the defeat. But the scale of it. Military. Political. Psychological. Total. You have 12 hours to respond, Elena said. A final pause. And if we refuse? The voice didn't come from Kareth. It came from somewhere else. Consensus Prime. The hierarch. Broken. Changed. Elena looked directly into the camera. And for the first time, there was something human in her expression. Not cold. Not distant. Tired. Then we show the galaxy, she said quietly. What happens to systems that refuse to change? The screen went dark. And across the galaxy, everything began to fall apart. The galaxy did not end. For a few hours. It felt like it might. Systems went silent. Borders closed. Fleets halted mid-transit. Entire civilizations paused. Caught between what had been and what was coming. For 50,000 years, the Galactic Council had been constant. Not perfect. Not just. But permanent. And then, in less than a day, it wasn't. There were no celebrations. Not immediately. Victory, on that scale, didn't feel like victory. It felt like absence. Like something enormous had been removed. And nothing had yet taken its place. On Unity Station, formerly Consensus Prime, the great circular chamber still stood. But it was different now. The towering tiers were gone. Leveled. Flattened into a single plane. No higher seats. No lower ones. No hierarchy. Just a circle. For the first time, every representative stood on the same ground. Ambassador Elena Varel stood at the center again. Not alone this time. Around her, delegates from hundreds of species filled the chamber. Some cautious. Some uncertain. Some still afraid. And some hopeful. It was quieter now. Not the silence of power. The silence of something beginning. They're arriving faster than we expected, said a voice beside her. Elena turned. Ambassador Thalen. One of the first to break from the old council. Her species had seen the cracks early. Had spoken when others stayed silent. They always do, Elena replied softly. When the alternative disappears. Thalen studied the chamber. 50,000 years, she said. Gone in a single day. Elena followed her gaze. It wasn't gone in a day, she said. A pause. It just took that long to notice. Below them, ships moved through the station's vast docking rings. Hundreds. Then thousands. Different designs. Different species. No longer separated by rank. Just, arriving. Trying to understand what came next. Some are refusing, Thalen said quietly. Elena nodded. How many? 17. The number lingered. 17 species. Blockaded. Isolated. Not destroyed. Never destroyed. Supplies? Elena asked. Delivered regularly, Thalen said. Food. Medical aid. Infrastructure support. But no trade, Elena said. No political access. No communication channels beyond basic necessity. Elena nodded again. Choice, she said. Thalen looked at her. Still. Elena met her gaze. Always. In a small apartment overlooking the lower docking bays, Captain Marcus Hale sat in silence. The war had ended 2 months ago. Officially. But endings were never that clean. On the table in front of him sat a single object. A data slate. Unread messages blinking softly across its surface. Commendations. Invitations. Requests. He hadn't opened most of them. Because none of them mattered. Not compared to the name engraved on the wall across the room. Lena Hale. 7 years old. She had liked stars. Had drawn them in messy spirals across every surface she could find. Had believed. Without question. That one day she would see them up close. Marcus leaned back slowly. The war had been necessary. He knew that. Every report confirmed it. Every document exposed it. If they had hesitated, if they had shown mercy at the wrong moment, humanity would not exist anymore. He understood the logic. Perfectly. But understanding didn't make it lighter. A knock at the door. Marcus didn't move. Another knock. Come in, he said. The door slid open. Lieutenant Orin stepped inside. No uniform now. No rank. Just a person. You're hard to find, she said. Marcus gave a faint smile. I've been told. She stepped further in. Her eyes moved briefly to the wall. She didn't comment. Have you read them? She asked, nodding toward the slate. No. You should. A pause. Why? Orin hesitated. Then answered simply. Because they explain something. Marcus studied her. What? She met his gaze. That if we had stopped. A breath. There wouldn't be anything left to regret. Silence. Marcus looked at the slate again. Then away. I know, he said. And he did. That was the problem. Weeks later. On a colony world once marked for correction. A garden bloomed. Not a monument. Not stone. Something living. Flowers from Earth. Plants from alien worlds. Growing together. Children ran through it. Different species. Different voices. Laughing. Unaware of what had been prevented. Unaware of what it had cost. And maybe. That was the point. Back on Unity Station. Elena sat alone in her office. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport. Unchanged. As if none of it had mattered. A message blinked softly on her console. Priority. Personal. She opened it. A simple recording. A small girl. Dark hair. Bright eyes. Mom, the message said. When can I come home? Elena's breath caught. Just slightly. Attached was a drawing. A starship. Not like the others. Not built for war. Not built for dominance. Something else. Something balanced. At the bottom. Written in careful, uneven letters. I want to call it peace. Elena stared at it for a long time. At the lines. The shape. The idea. Then she typed her reply. Come home, she wrote. A pause. Then added. That's a perfect name. Outside. The galaxy moved. Slower now. Careful. Uncertain. But alive. Some victories didn't feel like victories. Some endings didn't feel like endings. But in a garden, on a world that should have been lost, children from different species played together under open skies. And for the first time in 50,000 years, no one was deciding their future for them. Elena looked out at the stars. Not as something to conquer. Not as something to survive. But as something to build within. Carefully. Patiently. Together. And somewhere. In a child's drawing. The next chapter had already begun.